Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a nice break, and of course, you deserved it. And I hope you're ready to start with a new history term. So, today we are starting our new module on World War II. Now, in the last term, we looked at how World War I changed the world. Russia had a communist revolution and became the Soviet Union. The winning powers of Britain and France presided the League of Nations. Italy turned from a kind of democracy into a fascist dictatorship, and finally Germany first turned into a republic, which then collapsed under the weight of the many post-war crises, and eventually allowed Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party to get in power. Now, we will not discuss it a lot this term, but the Nazis had three aims. First, make Germany a great power again by dismantling the peace agreement made at Versailles and by granting its country the living space it needed. Living space in German is Lebensraum, which sounds evil. Can do that. Now, second point, Germany wanted to take revenge on the people Hitler had blamed for the defeat of the country during the war, even though, needless to say, those were just paranoid obsessions. The people he blamed were the communists and, of course, the Jews. We'll look at the final solution later. Not today, in a later lesson. 3. He wanted to turn Germany into a state that was completely dominated by the Nazi Party in every single aspect of human life, from the cradle to the grave to anything in between. Now, we'll look at the second and third objectives more in detail in the future. Possibly the curriculum is a bit in progress at the moment. But for today, we are focusing only on the first point, how Germany tried to achieve this living space by recreating a huge army and by attacking and conquering the surrounding countries, and how the two other big European powers of the time, Britain and France, reacted to it. To do that, we'll need to check the main steps of the Nazi aggression in the area. There is a map in the transcript which is very useful to understand it if you're not very confident with European geography. So to do that, to understand how Germany tried to achieve this Lebensraum, this living space, and how the other powers reacted, we'll need to look at the following points. First, the reintroduction of conscription in 1935. 2. The remilitarization of the Rhineland in 1936. These two steps will be discussed in the section on destroying the Treaty of Versailles. And then we'll look at the way they tried to achieve the Lebensraum by 3. Annexing Austria, the so-called Anschluss in 1938, and by annexing parts of Czechoslovakia in the Sudetenland crisis of 1938. So, then we will look at the three main reasons why the two powers did not immediately use force to stop Hitler. First, their economies were still very weak. 2. They had their own political problems and did not want to wage another war. And 3. They needed time to rearm. So let's look at how Hitler tried to destroy the Treaty of Versailles. One of his main aims was the destruction again of the Treaty of Versailles, the peace treaty at the end signed at the end of World War I, which blamed Germany for the war and humiliated the country by imposing a lot of limitations and by taking away a lot of territory. The treaty forbade the country from rearming, that is, building a big army, this is what rearming means, and created a demilitarized area between Germany and France in the Rhineland. What does demilitarized mean? It means an area in which soldiers should not be allowed to be stationed, are not allowed to be stationed. Why? This was done, of course, to prevent Germany from launching a new invasion of France, as it did in World War I, as it had done in 1870, as it had done several times before. Now, however, in 1935, only 2 years after Hitler rose to power, he announced that his government was about to reintroduce conscription to Germany, and that it had started rebuilding a navy and an air force. Now, all these things were explicitly forbidden by the Treaty of Versailles. He should not have done any of that. And they were quite worrying for Britain, and especially for France, because France was bordering with Germany, and a big Germany with a big army was seen as dangerous. Especially the issue of conscription. Conscription is when every man in a country at age 18 usually is required by law to join the army for some time, laying out the basis for a new and powerful army. So Hitler said, screw the Treaty of Versailles, screw the fact that we're only allowed to have 100,000 people in our army, we're gonna make a new conscription army which is gonna have millions of soldiers. Then there was the fact that he was building up a fleet and an air force, which was especially worrying for Britain. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about why. Britain is an island nation, and an island nation can only be invaded by sea or by air. The fact that Germany, under an aggressive dictator, was starting to build up an air force and a navy was seen by Britain as very worrying, as a direct threat to its security. However, despite perceiving the dangers, the two powers of Britain and France did not do anything about it, even though they were supposed to punish Germany for the violation of the treaty. The Nazis also sent troops to the Rhineland, the area between France and Germany, which was supposed to remain without any military presence at all. Once again, Britain and France were very aware of the danger, but did nothing. So let's move on to what Germany did after rebuilding these huge armed forces with the latest technology. At the time, the German population was growing, and the country was getting crowded and poorer due to the huge economic crisis of 1929. One of the key points of Nazi ideology was the idea that the German race was superior to all other human groups, and that it needed to achieve a proper living space by subjugating, that means defeating, the other inferior races, usually by force. And they wanted to do this in order also to solve the problems of poverty and crowdedness of Germany. The first step in this program of expansion was the reunification of the German-speaking peoples in Europe under a single banner, that of course of the Nazi Party. In 1938, the Nazis annexed Austria, a country which spoke German but which was not part of the old German Empire, since they used to have, back before the First World War, their own state, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, remember? They sent troops there in Austria in 1938 and forced the population to vote on a rigged referendum on whether they wanted or not to be part of Germany. The overwhelming majority of the population, 99.7-ish%, voted yes. But of course there were irregularities, like the ballot was not secret, people could see what you were voting, and people were usually voting next to Nazi commissioners who threatened them with violence if they voted no. So a lot of people were forced at gunpoint or with a threat of violence to vote yes. Again, France and Britain did nothing. Germany just yoinked, Austria, nothing. They hoped that this expansion would satisfy Hitler's expansionism and hunger for land for a while. But then, with the excuse of rescuing the German-speaking population of Czechoslovakia was one of the new countries that were formed after World War I. The majority of the population, the Czechs and the Slovaks, spoke a Slavic language similar to Polish, sort of. But there were also some Germans in the border regions between Germany and Czechoslovakia. Again, check the map, it will make it clear. And so Hitler decided to reunify German-speaking peoples, and so he invaded and conquered the area called the Sudetenland, where the Germans lived, and eventually the entire country of Czechoslovakia. Now, unlike the annexation of Austria, which was made to look like some sort of a democratic decision of the Austrian people, the invasion of Czechoslovakia was a blatantly illegal operation, a blatantly illegal land grab, okay? Which should have caused a reaction from Britain and France. Reaction which, of course, never happened. So, why? Why, in the face of all these breaches of the treaty, in the face of all these illegal behaviors, why did Britain and France do nothing? There were mainly three reasons. First, their economies were still weak. Second, they had their own political problems and did not want to wage another war. And three, they needed time to rearm. Let's look at them one by one. First of all, the 1929 crisis had hit Britain and France very hard and destroyed their economies, which were already weakened by the effects of the First World War. They could not afford to start another war simply because they did not have the resources needed to support their armies for a long time. Okay? They were wealthier than many other countries, France and Britain, but still they were not wealthy enough to support a new war. Second, the two countries were democracies. Okay? Democracies is where people decide who should govern based, theoretically, on the successes and on the failures. The British and French governments both thought that the population were against another war, and therefore they tried to solve the situation with diplomacy by trying to talk Hitler out of conquering Europe. Did it really work? Most importantly, however, Britain and France, who were not governed by stupid people, knew that a war was coming. Okay? They knew that whether they liked it or not, a war was coming. They did not want to cause it, okay, because they were not ready and because the population would not like it, but they knew that a war was coming. But they were not ready. Not only were they poor, poorer than required for a war, but also they did not have enough weapons, they did not have enough soldiers, they did not have enough tanks and planes and ships, okay? They needed to bide some time, okay? They needed to spend more money in weapons and armies. In the transcript, you will see a nice graph that shows that after 1934, British spending on defense just goes up. French spending of defense goes even upper at the time, okay? They knew that something was going on and they were trying to prepare. But again, they were not ready. They needed to bide some time. So let's conclude. While the policy of the appeasement, that is, allowing Hitler to illegally rearm and to make illegal land grabs around Europe, has been widely criticized, and we'll see on the next lesson what were its results and why it can be legitimately criticized as failure. At the time, it was seen as almost necessary by Britain and France, because they just needed some time to get ready for a war that they knew was going to happen. The two countries, being democracies, were also having problem convincing the populations of the necessity of another great war against Germany, because in that time, if you had a war between two great powers, it was going to become a world war, which eventually it did. So, three reasons why Britain and France tried appeasement. Their economies were weak, they had their own political problems, and the population did not want another war, and they were trying to bide some time while they armed themselves. Now you know more or less the facts. I would like you now to answer the question: how did Britain and France react to Germany's aggressiveness? As always, you will find everything in the Google form, and I'm looking forward to read what you write. See you next time.